So, ignore the dishwasher. It's doing its thing. I'm finally starting to catch up here. It's the third week in October. Next week is Halloween. Uh, Almost everything's done. I've still got to do my green figs. And I've got to make my syrups and molasses for next year. But today is Sunday. My wife has the day off. So she asked me to make her French toast. I want to tell you right off in the beginning, I prefer the thick sliced, or what in the States we call Texas toast. Okay, it's about 1.5, 2 centimeters thick maybe. But what I've got, the only thing that I have in the house, because she asked me to do this like 20 minutes ago. So I dug everything up. I've got the regular German toast bread, which is really thin stuff, basically what we'd call sandwich bread. So we're going to be making it with that today, which means I'm not going to be using as much egg on this as I would on the thicker ones, just so you understand that. We're going to be doing, still I'm using eyeball grandma recipe tactics, but there are a few rules to follow on this, okay? Number one, you want a pan just big enough that your toast is going to be in, your breads can fit, and you can get your spatula in to flip it. Anything larger is just going to overcook, burn around, and you're going to have issues with it not looking good and or possibly burning on the edges. Always try to cook it once you've heated your pan up, just like pancakes and so on. Cook it on about a medium heat so it cooks all the way through and doesn't burn on the outside before it cooks into the center. You're going to need a spatula, a whisk. I like the metal, not those plastic covered ones, but that just may be my preference. 1/4, 1/4, 1/4 cup measurement. You're going to need some eggs, syrup, of whatever your choice is. This actually is not syrup. This is my molasses that I made. This is the last of what I have. It's maybe about that full now. And I'll be using that up before, and then of course I'll be making the new stuff this coming week. That's what the wife wants. You're going to need milk. Again, if you're one of these vegan, vegetarian people, or out of your own lack of choice, you're lactose intolerant, I have found that oat milk is better than almond milk as far as I'm concerned on taste. Alright? You have an option. Oops. This is almost empty. Liquid vanilla, that's pure vanilla extract. Sugar, stevia, whatever that you want to put as your sweetener. I've got vanilla sugar packets, or as a sweetener you could use natural honey, pure cane sugar, something like this. Unfortunately, my sugar cane, I only got it in this year. It's very hard getting sugar cane into Germany as a living plant. I got them planted and they're only maybe 50, 60 centimeters high. So they won't be ready till next year for me to make actual sugar. So my preference, of course, because it's already pre-measured, is a sugar vanilla or a vanilla sugar dry packet, because you get too much vanilla in there and it can cause an off or bitter taste. Too much sugar is overly sweet. And I just like, this just seems to have a better taste other than me having to take and grind down my vanilla to put in here and then let it soak and all sorts of things. So for each egg, people have different variations, okay? For each egg, I find typically 1/4, 1/4, 1/4, hang on, 1 1/4 of a cup to each large egg. Large egg. If you go with a medium or small egg, you need to reduce the milk. So, make sure your eggs are washed and clean, because otherwise you can get all sorts of diseases in there from the chickens. We've not got our chickens in yet. We won't get those until the house is built, and then I can know exactly where I'm going to put the chicken coop versus where I have the beehives. Come here. So there are little separators that you can separate your egg. So I put it into the thing, that way if any crumbs get in there from the eggshell, you can take it out before putting it in. That's your option. Then we're just going to whip this up. You don't have to use a blender or any of that stuff. Just whip it up nice and well. I'm not trying to fill it with air like on a high, like using a blender on high or something. Now we put 4 eggs, so I'm going to put 1 cup of milk. Four times 1/4, basic fraction, is a whole. So that's 1 cup. It sits over there on my thing. Now I did a mistake on this. I should have put the milk in first and then put the sugar, my sweeteners and so on in, and tasted it before I put the egg. So now I'm going to have to deal with egg slime as I put in my flavoring. I normally, personally, if I'm doing this, I'll put 1 bag for every 2 eggs, depending on the size of the egg, of course. As well, because I make my own molasses and I make my own syrups. My stuff is not as sweet as this stuff that uses corn syrup and so on. So I can put the sugar in, and I'm not worried about the syrup or molasses over flavoring it or over sweetening it. But about every 2 eggs I put 1 package. Make sure it's stirred in really well, because you don't want to have it down in the bottom. You put that bread in there, and then all of it sticks to the bread, and your first French toast is overly sweet, while the rest of them are bland. So give it plenty of time to let that sugar, if you're using sugar or whatever you're using, to dissolve. I think we're going to go with the 3rd pack. I can't I can't quite taste that vanilla in there. I really like that vanilla flavor. I've got this, it's sweet. I can taste the sweetness, but I'm not getting that vanilla that I want. Much better. Much, much better. Again, it's just a matter of taste. Normally when I do my French toast, I use a molasses that I make, or I either go with a maple syrup, which we cannot get here. I have to buy it, so I use it very sparingly. and my syrups. And because I'm trying to keep this out in any of these, I use the minimum amount. So I want my sweetness in there while not being overly sweet or whatever. I've got just a touch, but it's that vanilla flavor that I want to bring out in it. Now, you're going to want to use tongs for this, and I'll tell you that's the wrong thing to do, because as soon as you grab one of these with tongs while it's wet, it's probably going to break and flip or break apart and then be down in your stuff. You're just wanting to coat it quickly and put it into the preheated pan. So let me get the pan now. I'll get it started and I'll show you what I do with that. So here I have this heating on high. So now I'm going to cut that from a 3 to a 2. I don't want to burn I'm using butter. You can use margarine, whatever, but you need something so that it's not going to stick. However, you don't want it so hot. You notice that's not bubbling, it's just melting. I only want it hot enough that I'm not caramelling or burning that whatever I'm using. I prefer not to use oil on this, but that's your preference. I'm going to take my one dry hand, one wet hand. I want to give it a chance to get in there. These 4 eggs will probably make because I'm using a smaller toast, will probably make God's maybe 8 or 10, because the bread's not as thick. I'm not absorbing it, but I'm feeling this. I'm watching its consistency. When it starts getting a little limp, I know that it's absorbed it, and then it will go into the, because I don't want it just to have just on the outside and then dry bread on the inside. I want it to soak that egg up. There we go. I'm starting to get it, starting to thicken on there. I can tell it's starting to get just a little floppy. There, see, it's starting to get a little floppy. I don't want it, whoops. I don't want it too mushy. Bring that down to a 1.5. I don't want it too mushy. I still want it firm, but I want to make sure that egg is absorbed in there. And you're not going to see this on the camera, but I'm going to put it over. And once this one goes in, another piece of bread's already going to go in and start soaking. Rinse my hand off. I'll just let that start soaking on one side. When I flip this, I'll flip that. Just watch the egg around the edges, and when you see it turning brown, you know it's time to flip it. I don't know if you can really tell, but I can already see little bubbles forming. That tells me it's cooking through, the same as when you're looking at a pancake. Now if you watch closely, you should be able to see those little bubbles coming up in here. That means it's cooking through in the center. So I've got the temperature just right. If I'm not getting that rise, but I'm getting a browning on the other side, it's cooking too fast. In my opinion, a good French toast, you should be able to eat without anything else. No powdered sugar, no jam. It should already have that sweet, the flavor consistency and everything that you should be able just to cut it and eat it without adding anything else on it. Again, that's a preference. My wife likes it with just a little bit of syrup. Sometimes I'll put a little molasses on it if I want that molasses flavor. But typically, you should be able, if you got your sweeteners and vanilla and so on mixture correct, you should be able to eat it just as it is. So this is the last one. Out of those 4 eggs, I've got 8 French toast. I have a little bit left over, and that I'm going to turn into a scrambled egg with salsa and cheese just as a side dish. I could have probably gotten another 2 out of here. So 4 eggs will get you, depending on the thickness of your bread, will get you anywhere from 8, 10, somewhere in that area. About, say, 2, 2.5 per egg. So at this point, I'm letting this cool down. I've gotten my French toast done. On this, now I'm going to add just a little bit of olive oil, virgin olive oil. And we're going to, with our remaining egg mix, we're going to make some scrambled eggs. The thing with scrambled eggs, again, if you're going to be using other ingredients, ham, mushrooms, things of this sort, into it, pre-cook those ahead of time, because those eggs are going to cook a lot faster than those. I'm putting, this is just going to be eggs and cheese with a little bit of salsa. So, I'm going to get the eggs cooking. When the eggs are almost cooked, then I'm going to put my cheese in, because it's just going to heat and melt from the heat of the eggs. That'll go on my plate. Then I will condense or reduce my salsa to the consistency that I want for that particular recipe, and we'll be done. Some people put their cheese on an omelet. They try to put the cheese on one side thinking they're going to flip it, but then you can't get as much cheese on there to get it melted as evenly. So I spread, that's one of the first things I put back on there when doing an omelet, is, if you've not seen my omelet video, that it allows the cheese to melt more evenly. And if the cheese is just away from the edge when you go it'll squeeze out a little bit and seal that, keeping that moisture in there. You don't want a lot of moisture in an omelet, but you do want a little bit. You don't want it to be dry. Here, my cheese is fairly melted. You notice when I did that, when it was over here, I moved my pan a little to one side, so I've got that heat distributed over here more so. So I'm effectively using the heat better, so I'm not wasting as much energy to do the same amount of cooking. Now you'll notice it's starting to puff up. That means that hot air is filling up in there. It's all cooked. We'll move this to the plate. And I want to I use, if I'm not making my own, I like the paste picante. That's just my preference. And I just want to reduce it a little bit so it's not running all over the plate. Remember, you may have to adjust that heat to keep that so it doesn't burn. I'm wanting to reduce it, so I wanted enough heat that it's burning that water vapor off without scorching or burning the rest of everything in there. So I'm having, right now, I had it up to a 2. I now readjusted to 1.5. It was still going. I brought it down to a 1. And I've still got that consistent little boil going on, but it's not scorching or burning to the pan. And there you go. Egg and cheese omelet with salsa and French toast with homemade molasses. And if that gets you hungry, go make some.